Wait a minute. You guys aren't the real Avengers.
Hey, welcome to the... I don't know what that was. Welcome to the newest episode of MAFF'S Movie Show. I'm your host, as always, Bing Bong, and today we are going to talk about the Tom Holland films, the MCU movies for Spider-Man. We got Homecoming and Far From Home, released in 2017 and 2019. We have come to the end of the road, as Boys to Men would say. I'm not going to discuss Spider-Verse, because Spider-Verse, there's nothing else to say. People have said everything that has to be said about Spider-Verse. It's a quintessential Spider-Man movie. It's a perfect animated movie. It's just a perfect movie, period. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. There's nothing else to contribute to that conversation. Let's get over that. But in comparison, the MCU Spider-Man movies are my least favorite Spider-Man movies out of all these movies that have released since 2002, starting with Tobey Maguire. These just don't vibe with me. There are various reasons why I don't enjoy these as much, or I don't hold these in such high reverence as I do other movies in Spider-Man's lore, cinematically. I think maybe I'm just not at that age anymore where when I watch a movie it impacts me, but then again, I saw Spider-Verse and it rocked my world, so this just isn't doing it for me. I think the MCU relies too hard on the world. These two movies rely heavily on Peter Parker's relationship with Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. I don't enjoy the shenanigans that goes on. I feel like it's very light. There are glimmers of that special stuff that Michael Jordan drank in Space Jam throughout these two movies, here and there. But overall, I think Homecoming is actually a really good Spider-Man movie. Notwithstanding what I just mentioned with the whole over-reliance on the MCU. I think Far From Home is more critical for that, and the glimmers are a lot shorter and fewer and far in between than they are in Homecoming. I'll get to Homecoming first, but of the two, I enjoy, yes, Homecoming more. I think it's a more complete, fulfilling, and satisfying Spider-Man story. For me, it's just seeing a new iteration of this character. We've gotten so many stories from Spider-Man on the big screen in all over almost 20 years. So for me, it's just more about what do you have to bring here. I think Tom Holland as Peter Parker and Spider-Man does a really good job. It all really more depends on the script for me with him. I think he's a great actor, and if you give him great stuff to work on, I think he will kill it. He is very expressive. He reminds me of Andrew Garfield, where you really feel the emotions on his face. Like, he could be a super expressive actor. He does a really good job selling the overbearing guilt and weight of what he's going through with responsibility as this character, with these powers, what he's going through as a young teenager, going through high school, also dealing with being a teenager on top of everything else. The most interesting thing about at least this movie, Homecoming, is Peter Parker being in high school, being that naive, dumb, dorky little kid who still has a lot to learn about life and the world, and he just also happens to have these larger-than-life superpowers that just enhances everything tenfold. He has teenage hormones. Well, now guess what? He also can climb on walls and lift cars. I also really like the cast. From top to bottom, there are little cameo roles, there are teacher roles, there are supporting roles. Everybody is great in this. Jacob B. as Ned, Zendaya as MJ or Michelle. Then you got Martin Starr as one of the teachers. You have Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes, the Vulture. You have Childish Gambino, Donald Glover as Aaron Davis. The cast is well-rounded overall. I just don't like the way they're utilized in the story, kind of like little chess pieces that kind of don't really go anywhere. You have the main arc for Peter Parker in this movie, dealing with Adrian Toomes, Michael Keaton, and then you have all the MCU stuff, how the Avengers first movie affected his life, Michael Keaton's life, to turn him into a life of villainy, and that's how the movie starts. And for me, that's where you have to go with it, where it's like, are you invested in these Marvel movies, these new Marvel MCU movies? Aunt May doesn't really have an arc, but she does have nice moments with Peter, like teaching him how to dance and tie a tie for the homecoming dance. Michael Keaton undoubtedly does a lot with his role here and really makes you care about him. Going through this rewatch for Homecoming this particular time, I was worried that I would clock out and not really care about what I was watching and just kind of realize, oh, I don't really like this movie, but I do. And they do a good job in the beginning setting up the stakes and just what is going on with Peter Parker as Spider-Man, being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That scene, that little moment of him sitting on the fire escape eating a churro while the sun is setting, with the train and the skyline in the background of New York City. One of my favorite little vignette moments for any Spider-Man movie ever. There are little nuggets and little visual moments, and the music by Michael Giacchino is great, but there are sprinkles of things that I really like. But overall, it just doesn't hit me the way the other movies do. But I think it's because, in comparison, the Tobey Maguire movies and the Andrew Garfield movies are more majestic. They add more weight to the character. It's the way they are constructed as movies. This feels more like in my opinion, a solid television hour and a half, 2-hour episode that's lighter, that's funnier, it's goofier, and has moments of darkness here and there, but it's really just there to give audiences a good time. And what I'm missing from these movies is that cinematic weight. I think watching these movies back to back over the past couple months, it's clear to me that just the way movies were made, and especially just in general, movie making has changed a lot over the past 20 years. But if you watch Tobey Maguire movies, or even if you watch the Andrew Garfield movies, and you watch most MCU movies, including these Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland. But again, I'm past my formative years. I'm almost hitting my 30s, and the character hits different for me now. I got what I wanted from Tobey and the Andrew movies, going through my childhood and going through high school and college. And now it's kind of just, for me, it is just kind of looking forward to seeing what kind of stories they could tell with different iterations and different actors for Spider-Man. And I do like Tom Holland as the character. Homecoming is a good movie for me. The characters are really good. The story is fun, and there are some good moments with Spider-Man in this. It just doesn't hit for me like those other movies do, unfortunately. But the offense is very, very clear, like I've mentioned briefly here and there before, with Far From Home, which I just don't... It's a really entertaining MCU entry where it's just world building for the MCU, where it's a solid progression point after the events of Avengers Endgame, which is probably one of their more fulfilling emotional movies in the MCU. But for me, it's not a good Spider-Man movie. I just don't, again, I vibe more with Homecoming, because I like seeing Peter Parker in high school, but I don't vibe with him just going on a road trip on the other side of the world, just kind of going through wacky shenanigans with his high school buddies and his friends. But then there's little glimpses of moments in this movie. Watching it again, I enjoy the action. I enjoy everything about Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. He is undoubtedly the best part of these movies. I can say what I want about these movies, but I love the villain casting and how they're utilized in both Homecoming and in Far From Home. I enjoy seeing Zendaya and Tom Holland interact with each other and seeing their love blossom in this movie. I enjoy seeing Peter Parker having to actually take responsibility for his actions and kind of seeing, even if it's really light consequences, some kind of consequence, when he has to leave the opera to take care of business with Nick Fury and Mysterio. He realizes, oh, now this jerk Brad is going to sit next to MJ and kind of take the thunder from me, and I'm not going to have that time to spend with her. Ugh. Like those little high school things that should have more weight in a movie like this. I wish there was more emphasis on seeing Peter Parker going through struggles as a teenager, as opposed to MCU stuff. This is just me too. As I'm talking and my brain is mushing because I've been up for like almost 24 hours, what I'm realizing is that if you look at it from a certain point of view, these are really good movies. I think as MCU movies, as entries into the overall spectacle that is the MCU, they're really entertaining and they're really fun to watch. But when I'm looking at it through the lens of what I want from a Spider-Man movie, it just, especially Far From Home, it just lacks that. It just lacks those elements that are present in even the weakest Spider-Man movies from the other two iterations. Going back to what I mentioned before with the opening of Homecoming, where we start with a scene that is part of the aftermath of the first Avengers movie, this movie opens up with Nick Fury and Maria Hill interacting with Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, and that's, again, why I feel like this movie is more focused on the MCU, because we are introduced in the beginning of both these movies to things that they have relation to Spider-Man in the story, but the first thing you're seeing is something that doesn't directly tie to Spider-Man as a character. We're seeing stuff that relates to the world of Marvel, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe first, so we can get caught up in what's going on with the story of everything else before we focus in on Peter. And that's part of the problem for me. I've learned to train my brain to accept that these movies aren't what I want them to be, and they're not made for me, obviously. There are a lot of people, there are millions of people who love these movies, and that's awesome. I got what I wanted from the Tobey Maguire movies and the Andrew Garfield movies. So at this point, I'm reiterating the statement I said before. I got what I wanted from a fulfilling standpoint and a satisfaction standpoint from those other movies. So anything after this is just icing on a cake. But yeah, I like to think that I'm a pretty optimistic person, and going into any movie, even if I've heard the worst about a particular movie, like let's say, for example, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, I go into every movie, despite the criticisms I may hear in the chatter I may hear all over the place, wanting to like something. And I didn't think Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City was a good movie, but I still try to find qualities that I like in that movie, and I did. And from Far From Home, it's not the Spider-Man movie for me, but I do find things in it to enjoy, and I still, from beginning to end, am entertained. We start pretty strong with Spider-Man Homecoming, which again, it's an entry in the MCU, so the way that the movie's made, it's bogged down a little bit by the fact that it is also being an MCU movie on top of being a Spider-Man movie. And then Far From Home, just kind of like it. I enjoyed it really very much the first time I saw it, and then over time, just kind of, it is what it is. So I'm hoping we end pretty strong with No Way Home. But now, I want to know from all of you, what do you think of the MCU Spider-Man movies, including Homecoming and Far From Home? Do you put them at the top when it comes to these Spider-Man movies, going all the way back to Spider-Man from 2002? Or do you agree with me and where I feel like they're the weakest stories when it comes to telling the story of Spider-Man? This has been so many. It's just crazy to me that we've had 3 iterations of the character now. So, and we've had multiple generations of people who have grown up with Spider-Man. So, like, there are so many different ways to tackle and have an angle for conversation and debate. So, if anybody wants to have a talk about this down below, let's do it. Also, you know what to do. If you enjoyed watching me for the past 20 minutes or so, you can like the video, you could subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell. So every time I make a new video, which I usually have a video up every Monday, you'll be notified. And again, of course, thank you everybody who is still here for tuning in and supporting. I really appreciate it. I love all of you. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you guys have a safe upcoming week. And I'll see you next week for going back to the news. So that was a shout out to Ken Knapsack for those who used to watch and still watch Smo's No, and the Smo Down Rundown and all that. No more Spider-Man talk. I'm sure people who have been watching this consistently are probably, I don't know if you're happy or sad about that. I really enjoyed this. I hope you guys enjoyed this, but hopefully we have some crazy news coming up. But yeah, we'll be talking about something next week. So yeah, see you soon. Take care. Love y'all.